The Tainted Glove presents Yumper and Svo at the Show podcast with Tom Yumper Garcia.
Oh, what a big man you are. Hey, let me buy you a pack of gum. I'll show you how to chew it. Ooh.
And Justin Svo's Svoboda.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Two guys from Chicago talking movies.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 8 of Yumper and Svo at the Show, presented by Tainted Glove. I'm one of your hosts, Tom Garcia, a.k.a. Yumper, and I'm with my co-host, Justin Svoboda. What's up, Svo?
What's up, Yumper? How are you doing, buddy?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Really excited about this episode today.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this episode all week, and I am jacked. One of the reasons that we do a podcast is on this episode tonight. So, pretty cool stuff.
Totally, for sure. A lot of influence from these people coming on. But since we're already here, let's get into our guest. First, let me introduce our first guest. He is one of the great nephews of Frank Lefty Rosenthal. You can probably find him at the Southside Ballpark, rooting for the White Sox and having a couple of brews. Mr. Sam Mendelson. How you doing, Sam?
How you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
No problem, man. Thank you so much for coming on. And let me get to our second guest. He is from the 108 podcast. He's a drunk uncle of White Sox Twitter. He's also your grandma's guilty pleasure. And he doesn't like giving out free ads. The Beefloaf.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. This is a little out of my comfort zone. I'm not a movie aficionado, but I appreciate you guys letting me spout off on some things I'm very passionate about. So good to be here, boys.
I think that, yeah, absolutely. We're super excited to have you. I think that one of the first things that you and I ever had a back and forth about was Sopranos episodes and
Yes.
Mafia movies. So it is very exciting to have you both. And I just met Sam a couple weeks ago for the first time, like in person, and you know, it was like meeting your best friend down the street, man. We hung out, we had beers, and yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, Spo and I had a couple 2-3 beers. It was great. It was after a White Sox win. Unfortunately, the White Sox went on to lose about 9 of 10, but we're back in the right track. And meeting Spo was an awesome time. It really was.
I can't believe there's White Sox fans who hadn't had a couple beers with you, Sam. I mean, I'm not saying. I'm just saying everyone who goes to White Sox games should share a couple beers with you, my friend.
I would like nothing more.
For sure. I actually was really wasted when I first time I met Sam. Then he started talking about casino, and I was like, oh, okay. But guys, so the way we usually run it, guys, we have our Twitter question. So you want to get to that?
Our Twitter question for the last week, we didn't do it the previous week because we recorded with Roper, but the last one that we did was, who was a person that you had a crush on from the movies that you saw as a kid or as a youth? And always our audience responded. We had some great ones. Regular friend of the podcast, Mailman Jack, went with Olivia Newton-John in Grease. And I mean, I get it, right? Like, how can
Definitely.
you not? Joey Slugs had Ali Sheedy in The Breakfast Club. Shane Spagnolia went with Princess Leia. Hank the Tank had Linda Cardinelli from Scooby-Doo. And Queen Nam, absolute person that we just got back from Vegas with, went with Benny the Jet Rodriguez from The Sandlot.
Yes.
And Postman went with Tom Selleck from whatever movie that is. It looks like Runaway. And I'm hey, good for you, man. We like Tom Selleck. We support everything here. So,
Is he going with Tom
great
Selleck or is he going with the girl?
that was the joke, guys.
Oh.
Way over your head.
Beautiful stash, Selleck.
Yes. Beef, who's your crush?
Oh,
movies?
this is a great question. I guess I'm a little older than you gentlemen, so I'll go back to kind of the similar era. I saw Joey Sluggs say Ali Sheedy. I'll go a little bit further back than that. For me, it's probably Phoebe Cates. Because Phoebe Cates was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High and then Gremlins kind of right back to back. So a young Beefloaf was getting a little bit of exposure to her. And in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, she's got the swimsuit on and everything, and she's like totally hot. And it's kind of weird because you got she's kind of the flashy, and then the Jennifer Jason Leigh is a little more the girl next door. But two attractive women in that movie. So I'll say Phoebe Cates. I'll stick with it.
What about you, Sam?
All right, so I grew up. I was born in '91, so I'm a '90s guy. I'm gonna have to go with, and this is because I love Adam Sandler '90s movies. Veronica Vaughn from Billy Madison.
Yes.
That was the first person at age, I think I was when that movie came out, I must have been like 7 or 8 years old. We were starting to get like, you're not quite there, but like you're drawing interest into the opposite sex, whatever. And I think Veronica Vaughn, I don't know her actual name, would be my number one.
I want to say it's Bridget Wilson.
That's correct. Yeah, it's Bridget
Yes.
Wilson. I just looked it up too. Yes, she's hot. Yeah.
I'm almost positive. I read somewhere she was married to Pete Sampras for a while.
She still is, I think.
She might still
Okay.
be. And she was in
That I didn't know.
She was Sonya in Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a story that I read when Mortal Kombat came out. They had to have shoes specially made for her because she has like a man-sized foot for Mortal Kombat. So I don't know why I remember that. I am not a foot guy, but I do.
Okay, I take that back.
Whoa, what size are we talking about here, Justin? I wear size 15. I mean, she got feet like the Beefloaf or no?
She might have feet like the Beefloaf.
Yes.
Wow.
I got to find out more about this. I'm going to look this up after the show. Thanks for enlightening me. I'm very much intrigued now.
We are full of useless, trivial
Great
information.
face, Andre the Giant feet.
I'm not Rex Ryan or anything. I'm just curious. All right? I just want to put that out there. Put it out in the world.
I like it. But yeah, that was our Twitter question for the week, and we'll always do one for the corresponding week. And I think we got some great responses here. I love the Linda Cardinelli one. I was a massive fan of Freaks and Geeks. And then she was eventually in ER, and she's still smoking hot. She's a show, man. She was in the Avengers too. She was Hawkeye's wife.
Yeah, she's actually in that horrible Capone movie too with
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy. She's actually plays Capone's wife. Movie's so bad.
That
but
did
yeah,
not
she's
make
still
the
good.
top 10 Mafia list.
No,
Just missed, huh?
did not. But since we're talking, you guys know we're talking about mafia movies and organized crime movies. I hate to put you on the spot, Beef, but when we were talking about getting you on for this episode, we asked you if you ever seen the movie Donnie Brasco.
And the answer was no, I had never seen it, to be honest with you. And it's funny. It's funny that you brought that movie up because my brother Trezy and I, we lost a very close friend about 5 years ago. And he was a guy that I would talk these types of movies with and everything. And he was always on me about, you got to see Donnie Brasco. Donnie Brasco is a fucking great movie. And so you guys reaching out and like, oh, okay, well, why don't you watch it? Let's get down on this. It was good that I finally did. It was almost cathartic, to be honest, to ingest the movie and just think about it and think about my friend as well.
So, Beef,
that's actually really touching. Like, serious moment here. Like, that's cool, man. Like, I'm glad that like we could, I don't know, maybe help facilitate that. Like, in a weird weird unknown way. We had no idea. You didn't tell us this story, but you want to go ahead and tell us what you thought about Donnie Brasco?
I loved it, and I loved it for a couple different reasons. One, I mean, I like seeing a leading man like Al Pacino play a role and where he's kind of a fuck up. He's kind of a guy, like just a regular mafia guy. And I was talking to my brother Trezy at brunch today, and we were just discussing how like the way the movie looks to us looks like probably what the mafia really looks like. In a lot of mafia movies, you get the aggrandizing of the people, and you see like Tony Soprano as being like, oh, this guy is like a captain of industry, right? This guy's like a CEO of a company. But a lot of the lower level guys are just hand to mouth situations. And you see a guy like this who's trying to have the bravado and be sort of a bigger person than what he actually is. And he doesn't have a dollar to his name. He's borrowing money off of his underlings, effectively in this situation. I had known a little bit about Joe Pistone. I'd seen some of the like documentary style, TV shows about this, but I had never seen the movie as is. Loved Michael Madsen, and so, I just love Michael Madsen in general. And then some of the lower key players, Bruno Kirby, etc. It drew a lot of parallels for me. Johnny Depp's character in this movie was a lot like Lawrence Fishburne's character in Deep Cover, where they go undercover and they get so far undercover that they basically have become what they're pretending to be. And he mentions it in this, and Lawrence Fishburne in Deep Cover says, all this time I'm a cop pretending to be a drug dealer. I'm nothing but a drug dealer just pretending to be a cop. And that's where, the Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone character finally got to that point kind of at the end of it, right before they were able to drag him out of there. So it's just interesting psychologically about the work that you have to put in and the amount of stress and pressure that goes into it. But I love inner workings, and I also love like the seeing how they earn the money in the Mafia stories. And so this one was kind of funny about them, like trying to smash open the meters and get the coins out. It's like very low level chintzy stuff, but it was funny and enlightening. So I love seeing Al Pacino playing the sort of downtrodden character. It reminded me of like how Robert De Niro is in Jackie Brown, where Robert De Niro is usually a leading man, and then in Jackie Brown, he's kind of messed up. Like he just kind of doesn't have all of his stuff together. And that's how Al Pacino is this. I thought he was terrific.
I love that comparison, like to Deep Cover. I think another great one would be The Departed, right? Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't know like what he is at certain points of this movie. But the way you hit on the way them trying to smash open the parking meters, and it's not all like, giant cocaine deals with the Pittsburgh connection. It's like just making it and just scraping by, and you got child support, you got a kid in a hospital. I love that comparison, Pete.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, no, it feels more realistic, and these guys are all scrapping for position too. The scene where the boss comes and they're all hanging outside of the place, and they're all just trying to get seen. They're all just like, hey, look at me, notice me. And it's like real life. It's like any company. You're trying to get noticed just a little bit, just to make sure, the people that are the owners or are running the company, that they know my name. And then they're doing the exact same thing, jockeying for position. So it's very interesting to like watch that recreation. And then watching the situations where he gets passed over, even with the nightclub down in Florida, they go out on the boat and like he wants that to be his thing. And not only is it not his thing, the guy who's basically above him in the Mafia, Michael Madsen's character, passed him up, but then he also wants Donnie to run it instead of him, and so he kind of gets pushed to the side. It's like real life in some ways.
Yeah, actually, Beef, I've read the Donnie Brasco book, My Life Undercover in the Criminal World, which is actually a really great read, and he also has another one like Payback, where he goes about the growings up of a mafia made man, just basically going through like certain characteristics that usually most of them possess and stuff, like his own experiences. But in the book that got released, I think I got it about 15 years ago, they actually have a CE that includes conversations with him and Lefty. And it's kind of eerie to hear how close Pacino is to the portrayal of Lefty Ruggiero. Like, it's spot on. When I watched the interview with Joe Pistone, he said that Pacino was just like him. The only difference was Lefty never wore a hat.
Oh, okay.
And for some reason, Pacino was obsessed with wearing a hat.
He felt the character needed that.
Now, Beef, this is your first time watching Donnie Brasco, and knowing what's actually going on with some of these actors in the real world, did it take away your enjoyment of this movie at all?
No, I can pretty much separate art from real life with respect to. I mean, I grew up when Michael Jackson was the biggest pop star in the world. So if I can't separate that stuff, I mean, there's a lot of art then from growing up that I wouldn't be able to ingest. So I can separate, oh yes, this is a great album or this is a great movie from, I don't really care I wouldn't want to have a beer with these people. Like, that kind of, and I tend to do that anyway. I even do that with ball players. As you know, I'm a huge White Sox fan. I don't really want to meet the players. They're entertainers to me. Let them stay out there in the field, and then us in the stands will hang out together. So yes, I that's a great question, Justin. But for me, I have a clear separation there.
So they were filming a movie kind of right where I grew up on 23rd and Damon. They were filming Public Enemies with Christian Bale and Johnny Depp, and it was a while ago, and I was a younger kid, and obviously you guys all know that I'm a massive Batman fan, and this was right when The Dark Knight was supposed to come out. So really? I went out and I waited, and there was rumors that Christian Bale was going to come out and sign. So I brought my copy of American Psycho over. I still have it somewhere.
Yes.
And he popped out. There was a police station right there on like 23rd and Damon. It's not there anymore. He popped out with Johnny Depp, and he signed for like an hour, like after filming for a bunch of time. And I can tell you that Johnny Depp is a weirdo. He came out and he would not talk to anybody unless they refer to him as John Dillinger, because that's who he was playing in the movie. He is a weirdo. So that's why I asked that question. It reminded me a little bit of that.
Yeah, he's known for being into method acting a little bit.
Sounds like it.
But to be honest with you, Donnie Brasco is probably my second Pacino performance that I like the most outside of Godfather. Me and Mr. Han get into it. We'll go into like my first choice, which is actually on our list. But I do like the way he I personally think Pacino, like performances from the 70s, he was excellent up to maybe the 90s. And this is probably this movie and the one we're probably going to go through is kind of like great. And then the performances start to decline until maybe The Irishman. Like he starts screaming more in a lot of his dialogue. And it's just ridiculous. I don't know if it's the old man scream or just like he just gets tired and just screams.
So without giving away anything on the list that's coming up, if you had to redo your list, would this movie make that top 10 list?
No, it wouldn't. It would not for me. I did enjoy it, but it would not make the list. No.
Okay. Thank you, Beef, for that review. And since we already got to what Beef was watching, what were you watching this week, Swole?
Well, I did go to the I went to the Thursday 8:00 showing of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And when I tell you this, Yumper has seen it now, and I don't want to spoil anything, so this is a spoiler-free review. It was completely average, in my opinion. I think that maybe we have built up so many expectations with the Batman and Spider-Man. I think that this movie was completely average, and I did not love it. What about you, Yump? I know you went to go see it yesterday.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday. I thought the movie was okay. I love Sam Raimi. I'm a huge Evil Dead fan. Bruce Campbell, I love Bruce Campbell. I'm a big nerd with him. B-list movie actors. It was Sam Raimi's first appearance into movies. And Superman, not Superman, but Spider-Man was his last big franchise he did in terms of superheroes. I saw a lot of that kind of like similarities with the way he shoots superhero or movies in this movie. I thought it was good, but not like I thought there were a lot of cheesy things in there too, especially some of the fights they had.
I thought it was all over the place.
And it's kind of the pacing was kind of off. I really like I think Elizabeth Olsen did a great job with the way she portrayed her character. She's probably the best part of the movie, to be honest with you. And she's smoking hot. So, but yeah, I love her part in the movie, but I think the movie was paced kind of weird. Especially when it seemed like there was a lot of action then it slowed down and a lot of action and slow down. So it was kind of pacing kind of weird for me.
What else did we have on the list this week? I know you just watched you went back and you watched Deep Cover, right?
Yes, I did watch Deep Cover, and that was on recommendation from the Beefloaf. I watched it again, and great movie. I've seen it before, but just getting back into it. Same comparison as Donnie Brasco as we just went through. I thought that was great.
I know this is one of Beef's favorite movies. He always talks about it. Beef, why do you like this movie so much?
Oh, I think originally just the time it was released in like 1993, somewhere in that area. And I remember hearing, there was the first time I ever heard Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. I wasn't into NWA kind of prior to that. But then when I heard the Deep Cover soundtrack song and hearing just Snoop flow, I was like, I remember telling my old man, I'm like, Dad, you got to get me this single. And it was on tape. Like it was a tape single back in the day. Like my dad would get me like records of like, Fresh Prince or whatever. And then he got me this single here. But just seeing the movie and just seeing sort of the psychological torture, effectively, that Lawrence Fishburne's character goes through, trying to do right, but going down a path and ending up realizing, like, even trying to do right here, I'm getting screwed all over the place, and now I'm kind of left to fend for myself at the end of this. And it really did bring together, like when I'm watching Donnie Brasco, it's like the same idea, like they're letting him hang out there, and this is what happened in Deep Cover. He just realized, I got to just look out for me. I'm just going to do this exactly how I need to. Now, Deep Cover's a little different story. Jeff Goldblum is the lawyer of the cartel or the small time drug dealers, and he wants to get into synthetic drugs, which is kind of an interesting plot line. I don't see that much anywhere. Like, okay, this is some new product that they're kind of pulling together. So I don't know, just time and place and characters, and that's how it kind of became like a cult classic to me.
I love it. I think there's a good scene in Straight Outta Compton when they're talking about doing the song from the Deep Cover soundtrack, where Dre has X amount of dollars to do the Deep Cover soundtrack. Sam, have you watched anything this week that you might want to talk about?
So I a gambling related movie that I actually wanted to bring up that is not, I don't know if it's like necessarily, mob related or whatever, but it's a Netflix movie. Has anyone here seen the movie Molly's Game by chance? It's a Netflix movie. Has anyone watched it?
Yes, I've seen Molly's Game with Jessica Chastain, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good flick.
I watched it for the first time this week, and underrated in my top, definitely in my top 5 of gambling movies. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. If anyone has not seen it, obviously Beefloaf, you've not watched it. Yumper, you've not seen it.
No,
Do you
I haven't
guys
seen
have
it.
Netflix?
Yeah, I gotta check it out. I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I would
You
definitely
guys
check it
would
out.
love Molly's Game. It's a great movie.
I completely agree. It's a good flick. You'll enjoy it. Jessica Chastain, one, is smoking hot, and
Yes.
she's like a hustler in this movie. And
She's just running these. She was once. I think it's actually Spo. If I'm not mistaken, it's based on a true story.
it's based
right?
on true story. She was what, like an Olympic athlete? Or
Yeah,
something
she was
that?
like an Olympian, like a figure. Maybe
A
not a
skier.
figure skater, like a skier. You're right, like a skier. And I think she had like an injury or something, and she ends up quitting, and she got invited to like a poker game, right? And long story short, she ends up working for this guy who runs like a high profile poker game every week, and she ends up just taking like, percentages off of the table from, these very high profile games from these guys who live in, I think, is it based in New York City, if I'm not mistaken?
I'm not sure.
I don't know where it's based, but if you guys have 2 hours on Netflix to kill, I highly recommend watching Molly's Game. It's a fantastic movie.
Oh, I gotta check that out then. Damn.
Yeah, that
Beefloaf,
sounds
that's right
interesting.
up your alley. You'd love it.
Sounds like it.
Beef, have you watched anything this week that might be of use to our listeners?
Not specific to the group of movies, but I did mention that I watched The Purge, and then I watched the second Purge movie. And my daughter and I have been rifling through horror movies, and so that's what we happened on this weekend, and so we watched a couple of them, and it was kind of weird to see Omar popping up in the second Purge movie. I was like, oh, there's Omar,
Your daughter,
yeah, I mean, good. I enjoyed him.
Your daughter didn't get that reference at all, did she?
No, she knows The Wire. Yeah,
Oh,
she's
okay.
seen The Wire.
Okay.
She's aware of The Wire. Maybe I'm a bad parent. I don't know. My daughter's only 12. I've let her watch all these horror movies. She's seen The Wire. She's
Oh.
seen Sopranos. So
You
it is what it is.
You should hear some of the stories that I've told about my old man on this pod. So, no, you are good, man. You are good.
Beef, I grew up on horror movies, so I've been watching them since I was like 5. Like my mom's favorite holiday is Halloween. I've seen like all the horrible movies, and then like good ones like The Exorcist and whatnot. So
I grew up with
Cool.
I grew up with just my dad, and when he couldn't find a babysitter and there was a movie he wanted to see, I had to go with. So like I remember going to like the Brighton Theater on Archer to see Platoon as like a 7-year-old.
Yes.
Like-
Incredible.
And by the way, Beef,
Yeah.
Swole's dad will listen to this episode and be like, "Why are you talking more shit about me?"
Hey, R.I.P. Brighton Theater, man. That's that brings back memories driving by there. My mom used to actually work across the street at Sam Sano's over there. That was where she worked, right there in Archer. So yeah, that's I know the area.
Yeah, I actually grew up on 38th and Cal after we moved from back of the yards, and I was like 12. I was there through high school.
Oh damn. Okay. All right.
It's a good area over there. But with that, let's get into our first movie to review, guys.
Shane was right. The working man is a sucker, Dad. He's a sucker.
He's wrong. It don't take much strength to pull a trigger, but try and get up every morning, day after day, and work for a living. Let's see him try that. Then we'll see who's the real tough guy. The working man is the tough guy. Your father's the tough guy.
Everybody loves him, just like everybody loves you on the bus. It's the same thing.
No, it's not the same. People don't love him. They fear him. There's a difference.
1993's A Bronx Tale, directed by Robert De Niro in his directorial debut, starring Chaz Palminteri, Robert De Niro, Leo Brancato, and Catherine Narducci, and also a small appearance by Joe Pesci. This movie had a $17 million box office on a $10 million budget. Swole, tell me why it's one of your favorite mob movies.
I mean, I think we had this in the 1993 draft. I know you did. It was your first overall pick. Obviously, it was Robert De Niro's directorial debut. It's a great movie, man. It's a story about a kid in a neighborhood that, like, probably most of us know, like a neighborhood like that. And it was a different time, and he fell in love with the wrong girl, and there's a surprise cameo at the end. Great dialogue. I love this movie. What does everybody else think?
Totally a big fan of it. Like you said, I was number one in my draft. I grew up on this movie. My brother and me can quote this movie up and down all the time. We send tweets and text to each other with this movie involved in it. Just a great job. Chaz Palminteri, I think, is such an underrated actor when it comes to his thing. I definitely want to go see his one-man show before he stops doing it. Beef, what do you think about this movie?
You know, it's interesting. The main character trying to weave through life and understand, like, oh, you know what? These friends I have, they're knuckleheads. I should not be doing most of the things that they want. And just trying to negotiate, like Justin mentioned, like a love life. And then also these, I'll call them father figures, I guess. His father is one of them. But then Chaz Palminteri's character is another one. And these people that we're seeing. And like Justin mentioned, like everyone's grown up in a neighborhood like that. And there are characters in your neighborhood that are kind of like this. Maybe they're not mobsters, but they're just someone in the neighborhood who has some influence, maybe over you or whatever, and maybe tries to help you out along the way. So it's just interesting to watch a young man kind of grow up in this situation, understand where his loyalties belong, and in some ways where they should belong. You know, sometimes you can have loyalty towards the bad guy because they're good to you. I mean, so it's interesting just to see all those, the different values that were popping up as a young man's growing up.
Yeah, this movie's actually based off Chaz Palminteri's life. He's actually I've listened to his podcast. I forget the name of it at the top of my head, but he actually talks about how Sonny's actually based off 3 gangsters he grew up with. He won't reveal their names, but I did find it kind of funny that the Eddie Mush in the movie is the Eddie Mush from his childhood. And they
a job. It's like, hey,
yeah.
come on.
And he told a great story on the podcast that when him and Robert De Niro were looking for somebody to play Mush, they couldn't find anybody. So he said, "Why don't we just use a real guy?" They went to go find him, and he was like betting on a horse. He was at a track betting on a horse. And they're like, Eddie, he's like telling him they want to give him this role in this movie. And he's like, "Oh, do I got to do it now? Because I got a tip on the next horse." So like, and when he passed, he said they've actually put a racetrack card in his coffin. But just the fact that realism to it was funny. Like the real Eddie Much is actually in the movie.
That's incredible.
I think like everyone knows that meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Leonardo DiCaprio's pointing at the TV when he's on the screen. Like, oh, I know that guy, right? That is exactly how I felt the first time I watched this movie and Joe Pesci shows up at the end. Sorry, it's 2022. Like, I'm not gonna apologize for
spoiler alert.
But when Joe Pesci shows up at the end to take over for Sonny's business, I was like, oh my God, it's Joe Pesci, and I'm pointing at the TV like an idiot. That's exactly how I felt the first time that I saw this movie.
Yeah, also it's Pesci and De Niro, so they're kind of like conjoined by the careers. But it's a great movie. But with that, let's get on to our next one.
But to be 16 and 59, staying away from home even if I didn't have a dime, because the old man was just waiting to give me his piece of time. Drove me to the street just to save my mind.
1992's American Me, directed by Edward James Olmos, starring Edward James Olmos, Boone Forsythe, Pepe Serena, and Sal Lopez. This movie had a budget of $16 million and made $13 million at the box office. Now, the reason I picked this movie over Blood In, Blood Out was this was actually one of the movies that inspired Blood In, Blood Out, and they're both made around the same time, but this movie actually uses the factual things that happen with the Mexican Mafia. And this movie has a lot of controversy around it. There's actually hits put on almost his life for this. Danny Trejo does a great explanation. If you want to check him out on YouTube. He does a great explanation of why he actually had to save James Olmos' life because of his portrayal and the factual stuff that the stuff he claimed was factual that he put in the movie that really wasn't factual. But just shows the basic inner workings of a prison. And I think it's a little more raw than Blood In, Blood Out. So what do you think about that?
I think, first of all, I think this is a great movie, but I think the best parts of this movie to me are before like Edward James Olmos' character comes to like fruition, the night that his parents met and the circumstance that his parents like got together under and the riots, the Zoot Suit riots. I think to me that's the best part of this movie. I think this movie is underrated And it definitely has a place in like mafia lore, and I love that it's more important to, or how important, not more important, but how important it is um to the Latino community, right? Like someone that grew up in Pilsen, like people quoted this movie and people talked about this movie. And I think it's super important that it's on this list. And I do think that it deserves to be in there over Blood In, Blood Out.
What about you, Beef?
Yeah, I mean, I remember hearing about the hits and things that they did not get correctly in the movie, kind of and also the comparison to Blood In, Blood Out. When I was younger, Blood In, Blood Out was a lot more popular than this movie. That was the movie that we would all rewatch a million times, and so American Me wasn't the movie that we were watching a bunch of different times. Great movie, and Edward James Olmos. I mean, just a great portrayal here. I love the movie. I need to go back and rewatch it, actually, because I feel like I wasn't giving it enough respect watching Blood In, Blood Out so many times all these years.
Yeah, he took this role a little too seriously, and that's what Danny Trejo makes fun of him a little bit about. But I think it was very raw and it's very graphic. But I think that's what kind of stuck with me, because Blood In, Blood Out's good, but it has like some corny parts in it with Miklo, and I like that movie. There's a lot of corny parts in that movie. I thought this was like a little more serious tone to it. It kind of stuck to like the message.
Yeah, I mean, this movie treats rape. I mean, like, which doesn't, it's not in a lot of movies, but this movie does, push that boundary right there. And you're right. Blood In, Blood Out doesn't. Blood In, Blood Out does some. You're right. Some hokey-ish things. It's still a good gangster movie, regardless. But yeah, I would agree with you.
So Sam, have you seen this movie?
I think he's down, and I'm like, sorry, am I unmuted now? I'm
You're
unmuted.
unmuted.
Okay. I have not seen American Me, but as we're reviewing these last couple movies, I'm writing them down as a list of movies I need to see. I would love to watch these. I've not seen American Me before.
Sam, you're coming over to my house one night. We're getting wings, and we're watching some of these movies.
Name the day. Done.
We'll figure that out.
All right, guys, let's move on to our next movie.
Look, got a guy who says he hears Costello's moving the process to China. He set up the whole fucking job in Pop Kennefic. You do not want to miss it if Costello takes a dump.
We'd miss a lot less if you made your informants available to us and, of course, to the Bureau.
Without asking for too many details, do you have anyone in with Costello presently?
Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe fuck yourself. My theory on feds is they're like mushrooms. Feed them shit and keep them in the dark.
2006's The Departed, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Jack Nicholson, Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Wahlberg, and Matt Damon. This movie had a budget of $90 million and a box office of $291 million. Beef, now this is your number 5 on your list. Let us know why.
Yeah, absolutely. And compliments for the clip you picked that right there. I'm not generally a fan of Mark Wahlberg's acting work, but I thought he was absolutely terrific in this movie. Maybe because he was just playing himself. I could see him totally acting like this. I remember when he was a bad boy doing rap music back in the day, which I guess he doesn't like talking about, and he would be like getting in run-ins with the law. I could totally see this right here. No, I love the movie because you don't often see the tact of the gangster also being entangled in law enforcement in various ways, right? He had big protections, but then also at the local levels, he was recruiting his own people, putting them out there, and so Jack Nicholson's character Frank Costello is weaving into all these different things to create protections for himself. This is much more what I envision, kind of like very high end gangsters doing. Having themselves protected kind of from all angles, which he basically did here. And it's Irish Mafia, which we don't get a lot of the Irish gang stuff. U.S. is infatuated with Italian Mafia, so it's nice to see some of the other ethnicities represented here. I mean, obviously, terrific cast. Obviously Leo and Matt Damon and I'm trying to think what's the guy who gets thrown off the roof, the
Martin Sheen.
Leader. Martin Sheen, yeah, exactly, the kind of the leader of the intelligence part. Like, yeah, just a terrific, absolutely terrific cast, and I love the interplay even at the end between Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Matt Damon's character.
Yeah, great. It's masterfully put together. Scorsese, you'll probably hear his name a lot in this list. when you think of mafia movies or organized crime, you think of Scorsese and the way he shoots a movie. It's kind of funny to me that this movie actually won him his Oscar finally for Best Director, and he considered this movie his B movie, which I think is really hilarious.
This movie to me is super quotable still. Like it's right like on the Goodfellas Casino like quotable list. The other day I got into like a little bit of an argument with a coworker, and I'm kind of the new guy at work. I've only been at this store for a couple months. He's like, "Who are you to tell me like how to do this?" And I go, "I'm the guy who does his job. You must be the other guy." And
yes.
Someone looked at me like, "Where did you get that?" I'm like, "That's from The Departed, man. Like that is from The Departed." I quote this movie all the time. I don't know. I'm on the fence. Like with the way Beef said, you're not a big fan of Mark Wahlberg's acting. For some reason, I don't know. Like he's a terrible actor, but for some reason, I like a lot of the movies that he chooses. Like we talked about Fear, we talked about Renaissance Man.
Yes.
Those are all guilty pleasures of mine, and I really enjoy them. And I really liked him in this movie here, and I love the end with the booties on, walking into Matt Damon's apartment, and then The Simpsons made fun of it a lot. But the rat that goes across the screen at the end of the movie, and Ralph Wiggum in an episode of The Simpsons goes, "The rat stands for obviousness." But I think this movie's super quotable. I love the way it's shot. I love, and we go on these tangents a lot. I love the Van Morrison Pink Floyd cover of Comfortably Numb in this soundtrack. To me, this is a top 5 Scorsese movie. Like you could talk about Taxi Driver and make the argument that those should be in there. I know it's not a mafia movie, but this could very well be a top 3 Scorsese movie for me.
I would say I will agree with you on that. Even the beginning, "Gimme Shelter," the way they shot that with Jack Nicholson doing the narration, that was nicely shot. It's funny to me, like this Costello, Scorsese originally wanted Pacino actually to play Frank Costello, which I think would have been kind of a change of things.
Yeah, thank goodness he didn't do that. Jack Nicholson was great as that role.
Yeah, they're just, and Mark Wahlberg, I know Beef, you don't like, but he got nominated for Oscar in this role, and it's actually his natural accent that he uses in this movie.
He's great in this. I agree. He is great in this. I just don't like him in most other things he does. It's just like, I don't know. He just is a little hokey or something to me. I'm not sure.
We all have that one person that we're like, all right, I get, like, why is this guy still working? Like, we all have that one actor.
Yeah. What about you, Sam? What do you think of this movie?
I saw The Departed when it came out in theaters, and I don't think I've seen it since. I thought at the time it was a great movie. Would I put it in my Scorsese top 5? Maybe. I don't. I have a very specific Scorsese type. Goodfellas, Casino, obviously classics. The Departed is a great movie. I don't know if it's as quotable for me, but I think it's a great movie, and I can't really say it's. I would say sure. If I were to put it top 5, I think Taxi Driver is in my top 5 for sure. Loved Taxi Driver because it was. You see De Niro at such a younger age, and for me that would put it over the edge of, if we're deciding between The Departed or Taxi Driver, I'd probably go Taxi Driver. But The Departed's a great movie. It's a classic.
Yeah, in that case, I would go Taxi Driver, Departed, because Taxi Driver and Raging Bull are more quoted than The Departed. Raging Bull and Renaissance Man, Leland Brancato does an impression of Robert De Niro from Raging Bull. Taxi Driver has been parodied, so many times. I know The Departed has been parodied, but like those two movies are cultural icons. They're what we thought a great director should be. Great films and those psychological things. So I agree with you on that aspect. I just think that this movie is it's a mob movie, but it's something a little bit different from Scorsese. And like Last Intention of Christ was like another movie that was different from Scorsese. It wasn't, because Scorsese's known for mafia organized crime movies. This is something to me is like gave out a little different vibe to it. And that's why I think it should be on his top 5, because he kind of stepped out a little bit out of bounds. We're not talking about the Italian mob anymore. We're talking about Irish mob. And I thought it was actually cast very well, even though he wanted certain people to play. Brad Pitt was considered for Matt Damon's part. And I don't think any of those choices would have worked. Great actors, but who they have in there just fits so perfectly for it. But enough of my rambling. Let's move on to our next movie.
Want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. And that's how you get Capone.
1987's The Untouchables, directed by Brian De Palma, starring Robert De Niro, Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, Andy Garcia, and Charles Martin Smith. This movie had a $25 million budget and made $106 at the box office. Swole, let me know about The Untouchables.
I mean, for me, this movie is like a little bit of my childhood. This was filmed, like my elementary school is in this movie. They filmed it right on like 22nd and Oakley. You can see the church that I was baptized in the background. When, Sean Connery comes to pick up Kevin Costner after the bomb threat at his house. The line that the audio that you just used is an iconic line. Like, that's the Chicago way. The scene at Union Station with the stroller going down the stairs, it's iconic. It's a good movie. Robert De Niro is in it, but he's not like in it. Like, his role as Al Capone is really small compared to like other things that he's done. But the casting captured lightning in a bottle. Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, Andy Garcia. It's a really great done movie, and they made Chicago feel like it was, like the 1930s again. And I love every single minute of this movie.
Totally agree. Beef?
Yeah, I mean, I would in total agreement. This was my first introduction to Andy Garcia, kind of at the time that I could remember at least, and I like that he's lying about his ethnicity so that he can be on this group with these guys, and just the interplay between the law enforcement side, and then also the prohibition, all that stuff, chasing down the prohibition. It's not something I would necessarily agree with, but it was a big story at the time. It was a big law, a part of Americana at that point in time. I also love kind of one of the end scenes when Kevin Costner runs the gangster just and throws him off the roof. Just goes like old school. Like he's such a law abider, and then he gets pushed over the edge and throws the guy off the roof and says, "Oh, he's down in the car." After you throw him off the roof. So yeah, great action. I agree with you. De Niro's a lesser role, but he is a super intimidating Al Capone. Like the baseball bat, the meeting, and everything. I mean, that's just scary stuff that you envision really happening with
getting shaved, and he gets nicked, and the barber's like, "Oh shit, what did I do?" Like,
exactly. Incredible.
But like you said, Andy Garcia like lying about his ethnicity, and Sean Connery goes, "Oh, a wop," and Andy Garcia goes, "Better than you, you stinking Irish pig."
Yes.
Yeah, just the way they shot the city, like, so that's just part. Like, I'm a big history buff. Like, I love the old school look of it. Billy Drago is the guy that throws off the building, and he's actually in a Michael Jackson video with Chris Tucker. He plays a bad guy in one of those music videos.
He's Frank Nitti, right? Like,
yeah, he's Frank Nitti in the movie.
Frank Nitti in the Untouchables, and he throws him off the building.
Yeah.
I remember my dad getting off of work and walking down to watch this being filmed. Like, not that scene, but like scenes of the movie being filmed, because it was done right there in the neighborhood. I also think that's why it's super important to me, because it kind of showcases the neighborhood I grew up in.
What about you, Sam? What do you think about the movie?
I don't think I've ever seen Untouchables. I'm not gonna lie. I would love to watch it. Well, this might be our next one that we got to watch along with what was before The Departed, whatever we reviewed before that. But I have never seen The Untouchables, but I'd love to watch it.
Yeah, you got to come over and watch The Untouchables. It's fantastic.
Done.
Definitely, it's a classic, man. But with that, let's get into our next one.
You think you're big time? You're gonna fucking die big time! You ready? Here come the pain!
1993's Carlitos Way, directed by Brian De Palma, written by David Culp, and starring Al Pacino, Sean Penn, Penelope Ann Miller, John Leguizamo, and Luis Guzman. This movie had a budget of 30 million and made 63 million at the box office. Now, Beef, I told you earlier that Donnie Brasco is my second favorite portrayal of Al Pacino outside of the Italian mobster role. This is actually my first. I think this movie, like Pacino, does a lot better job of portraying previous from his mob world characters as a person that's just trying to get out and trying to go straight, and that's why I like this movie a lot more. I think that he actually has like a lot of sincerity in how he wants to go straight, and I love the fact I'm not a big fan of Scarface. I think Scarface is overrated in my opinion. I love the fact that Pacino plays a Latin character in this movie and he actually speaks Spanish. That's one of my big things.
Makes sense.
But what did you think about this movie?
You know what? The lasting memories for me of this movie are, obviously, it has one of the absolute saddest endings of these types of movies because it feels less deserved, right? Like you mentioned, he's trying to get out. He's trying to get away with this woman, and they're trying to make a life of it. Most of these movies, most of these mob movies, they're not trying to get out, and they're not remorseful for anything. And so when they go down, when they either get killed or get put in prison, you don't really feel that bad. It doesn't conjure up the emotions that a movie like this does. So for me, this movie, just like, you know, the John Leguizamo character popping up at the end and murdering him is like a shocker and like, oh, this is terrible. Like you really feel in your guts. And the other lasting memory for me from this movie is that Sean Penn as the lawyer looks exactly like fucking Dallas Braden looks right now. And it's ridiculous. Every time I see Dallas Braden, I'm like, you were in Carlitos Way. Oh wait, that's the wrong guy. I'm sorry, you know.
He totally steals the show though. Like his character in the movie is hilarious. Davy Kleinfeld.
Yes.
I'm just a big fan of the movie. Swell, what about you?
I love that there was this massive push or wave of Scarface in like the early 2000s, and people loved it, and it was glorified, and people talked about how great it was. And I get it. Like I get the story and why people like it. But then there's people that realize it's not a good movie. Like it's not a great movie. So I love that you said that about Scarface. And we talk about not Francis Ford Coppola.
Hang on, you guys said we can disagree on some stuff here, right? Can I push back on this Scarface hatred that I'm hearing right here?
Yes, let's hear it.
Now, I agree with you guys. It's not a great movie. But what it does is pushes a lot of boundaries, right? When this movie came out, it was a movie that was rated X based on violence, Scarface was. And the X ratings before that were more based on nudity or like soft pornography. This was one where it was like, hey, this is a super violent movie. It really kind of pushed the boundary of what you're going to see in an organized crime movie. And yes, there's a ton of cheesy crap in it, but it had to kind of do that, push out the boundaries for everyone else to kind of come behind. It's not a great movie, I agree. And like viewing it now, it's like this is a crappy movie. But they got the guy in the shower, and they're gonna chainsaw his him all up. I mean, like there's like shit in this movie that just in Scarface that you hadn't really had out there yet.
I love that point of view, and I guess as someone who was -1 years old when Scarface came out, right? Like I love that point of view. Like to me, the violence and stuff in movies has just always been there, right? So I didn't know that. So that's like a completely different point of view that I love hearing. It doesn't make the soundtrack not corny. It doesn't make Al Pacino's accent not corny. But
he's dancing in the club,
right? But there's what do we always say on Twitter? Like he ran so others could walk or whatever, right? Like so Scarface did that so all these other movies could live, right?
Go ahead, Swell. I'm sorry.
We talked about Martin Scorsese a lot, but Brian De Palma's going to have 3 movies on this list, or he could be like he should be up there when we're talking about like directors and the mafia genre, right? Like this is a fantastic movie, and it's also the only movie that I've ever fucking hated John Leguizamo in. I have never ever had a bad thing to say about John Leguizamo except Benny Blanco from the Bronx. I love that Stephen Bauer makes another cameo in this from Scarface. There's the Scarface tie-ins, and I think Luis Guzman is an underrated actor that doesn't get the love that he deserves. He shows up in movies, and you're always like, "Holy shit, there he is!" Right? Like Boogie Nights, for example.
Love him in Boogie Nights. I was just gonna mention it. Love him in Boogie Nights.
Like I love Carlitos Way, man. This movie fucked me up. I think this was a different. Like I love the way that you guys like position this about he's just trying to get out and do right. And mafia movies are all about access and more and money. This guy just wanted to rent cars to fucking tourists in paradise, as Davey Kleinfeld said. Yeah, man, I'm gonna watch this movie when we're done with this podcast now.
Yeah, that's like the reason that drew me into it. And like I love the fact that De Palma actually went, well, his movie's based off a book, but the fact that he actually went with the role of, we're gonna show something that's not the glamour. We're gonna show something that after the fact. He did some of his time. And that's what I love about the movie. And as far as Scarface, like Scarface does have its cultural impact. I agree with Beef on that. But De Palma made Scarface, and then he made this movie, and I think he was kind of upgrading his gangster movies, and with this, and also I love this movie too because it has a drawback to the Untouchables. When they're fighting you at the train station, that's a straight up drawback from the Untouchables, and he wanted to improve there, and that's why he added it in here. So I'm always gonna like Carlitos Way over Scarface. That's just me, and as a fellow Latino, Beef, like Pacino's accent is fucking horrible, dude. Like,
Agreed. It's not even trying. Like, agreed.
I also wonder what, like, just to go back to Scarface for a minute, because I think like it needs to be talked about. That movie was written by Oliver Stone and directed by Brian De Palma, and Brian De Palma rewrote so much of that original Oliver Stone script, kind of like how Oliver Stone did to Quentin Tarantino and Natural Born Killers. I wonder what Scarface would have looked like if it would have just been a pure Oliver Stone like script. Like, you know how much cocaine Oliver Stone probably did while he was writing that script? Like,
he admitted to it. He admitted to it. He was
absolutely. Like, no, I know he admitted to it, but I want to know like the amounts. Like, I want to know how much he did, right? Because that script would have been completely banana.
Yeah. What about you, Sam? What do you think about the movie?
I'm here patiently waiting for the Casino and Goodfellas reviews because I can talk a lot more about that. I have not seen Carlitos Way. Unfortunately, these are before my time. I have to watch these, and I know Beefloaf is probably judging me for not, but I have not seen Carlitos Way. Chalk It Up is another one that I have to go watch.
We're in a judgment-free zone, Sam. You're good, man.
Yes, definitely.
Sam, I'm judging. I don't know. I don't care what they're saying. I am judging, even though, I was like, whatever, 14 when this movie, 15 when this movie came out, and you were like 1 year old. That's okay. I'm still judging.
What is this, 80? Carlitos Way is 83. I was
93.
-8. But that's not an excuse. I absolutely have to watch the movie.
Do you like Scarface?
Love yes. It's been a minute since I've seen Scarface, but yes, I have never seen Carlitos Way, however.
All right, I might be judging a little bit now.
Do you know in like the early 2000s they released a Scarface video game for PS2, and if you can find it, it's worth like $400 right now.
I had it for Xbox. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
That I did not know. I never knew there was a video game.
Yeah,
there was a Godfather video game, there was a Scarface video game, and there's a Sopranos video game. I actually have the Sopranos one.
Beefloaf.
Yes,
Before
sir.
the end of the baseball season, I'm coming over. We're watching Carlitos Way.
Let's do it, baby. We'll do it before a game, and then we'll go over there and we'll be hyped up from it.
Get
How
all
about
cranked up.
Carlitos Way, Sunday soak, game.
That's right.
Beef might be crying after Carlitos Way, the way it ends.
It's emotional.
The Sunday soak is just going to be Beef, Sam watching Carlitos Way for an hour and a half.
It's gonna be a live stream of us watching that movie, talking about it.
Style.
Viewership will be off the charts.
That's right.
No, but let's get to our next movie, guys.
I heard you paint houses. Yes, sir. I do, and I also do my own carpentry.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
2019's The Irishman, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and Stephen Graham. This movie had a budget of upwards from $150 to $250 million, and it made a whopping $8 million at the box office. This movie was also nominated for 10 Oscars. Swole, I know this movie was big on your list. Tell me why.
So you can't just throw that out there and not say that this was a Netflix exclusive. It released very limited time. I saw it in the theater 3 times. But it was a very limited release. I had to go to Webster Place on like Clark and Diversey to go see it.
That brings back memories. I've been in that movie theater.
And if you've ever been to Webster Place, it's like going into it is like the beginning of Inception with the stairs that change, right? It's so bizarre. I think this completes the trilogy for me, right? Like, or Martin Scorsese's trilogy, like big three trilogy, right? Goodfellas, Casino, The Irishman. Goodfellas, they were all young, they were all up and coming, things were happening. Casino, they were a little bit older, they had some family drama. And then The Irishman, they're older. This is the last go round for a lot of these guys. And it was very fitting for, De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci, the way they played these roles. And it was really nice to see that Al Pacino could still act before he totally slipped into senility, right? This was a good portrayal of Jimmy Hoffa.
Yes, the non-screaming Pacino. He screams in the movie.
Yeah.
But not screaming. But I think the underrated character in this movie is Stephen Graham.
I completely
as
agree.
Tony Pro. If you guys have not watched Boardwalk Empire, definitely check it out. Stephen Graham gives the best portrayal of Al Capone, in my opinion.
Completely agree.
Complete underrated actor, and his natural accent is very hard to understand, to the point that Al Pacino told him, "Why are you talking like that?" Like, he's like, "That's the way I normally talk." He's like, "Oh, well, talk like Tony Pro so I can understand you." Like, stuff like that. Like, he's an excellent actor. His portrayal of Tony Pro in the movie, I love it, and it kind of gave me some like similarity to Joe Pesci's character as for Tony Spilotro character in Casino, when they're playing golf or when they're doing just like little similarities. And I think Scorsese put that in on purpose. The reason I said this movie made $8 million was this is actually one of the first movies to break the theater clause that movies had. So Netflix got it released within 30 days, and that's why no theaters picked it up, because they wanted it to be released in theaters for 90 days before they put it on a streaming service. Netflix released it day one and said, fuck that. The CGI in it, I'm kind of iffy on it. I think they did a decent job on it. It looks kind of weird, but you can tell the actors are older.
It's bad. Robert De Niro with the blue eyes.
The fight scene is hilarious. Like,
it's the second worst kick in a mafia movie, like Jimmy Caan in The Godfather, and then
Punch.
Robert De Niro beating up the store owner for pushing his daughter. Like, the worst kick I've ever seen.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Sam? What do you think about The Irishman?
So I saw The Irishman beginning of COVID. I liked it. Not a movie I think I would watch more than a couple times. I thought it was a little long. Not to say that Goodfellas, Casino, or any whatever, any of those movies aren't long. Inherently, they're always long. It was a little. I think it was a little thrown off because of the fact that Joe Pesci looks so goddamn old in the movie. But it's a great movie. I just wouldn't watch it. I wouldn't go out of my way to watch it again. Whereas other Scorsese movies, I would.
Yeah, I can see that too. What about you, Beef?
You know what? This does not rate up high on my organized crime film movies. I really do love the individual performances. You mentioned Stephen Graham as Tony Pro is awesome, and Pacino is great as Jimmy Hoffa. And it's kind of funny. My grandfather was a union delegate in Western New York during this time, and I remember when he was still alive, my brother and I would bring up Jimmy Hoffa to him, and he'd get real quiet. He would never want to talk anything about that. And I wonder if he ever had any interactions with him. But I love the Hoffa character because he's such an incredible prick the entire time. And you could totally envision this is how this guy was able to harness power. But then he didn't know when to stop. He didn't know when to, like, okay, I got to pump the brakes on this. I shouldn't be so aggressive in these situations. I got to be able to finesse this part of it. So I did like those individual performances. But as a movie, for me, it just didn't stand up that much. I've watched it a couple times. I've tried to love it, but I just can't really get into it that strongly, as much as I love those individual characters.
How does it feel to be so wrong, Beef? I'm just busting balls. I get it. Like,
it's not the length either. It's not the length of time, because like Sam brought up the length, and then he backtracked. He's like, well, all these movies are long. Yeah, they are. And then when you watch like The Sopranos is, however many episodes, that's like 60 movies or whatever it is, worth of episodes. And the same thing with some of the long form HBO stuff. For me, it wasn't the length. It just didn't deliver for me. It just didn't feel. Another thing I liked, I guess, about an underrated part about the plot line was you got to see how much Robert De Niro's character paid for it personally with his personal relationships. And that's something that they pushed up to the top, which I'm glad they did, because I don't think you see it's in there in all the other movies, but it's not as prevalent and present, and they don't show the ending of it. Like, oh, this is sad at the end, where his daughter won't even talk to him. He tries to come to the bank to see her, and she's just like, doesn't want to have anything to do with him. I kind of like that, but for me, the whole thing just didn't hold up well, even though I like the individual characters.
I think the CGI played a part in that too. I mean, these are all excellent characters, but it just looked weird to me. I do like the story. I like the way he told the story. Knowing the facts, of course, that this is just from the one person's perspective. I think Scorsese was trying to do like the end of the trilogy, like Swole was saying, like getting the band back together for one more run. And I'm glad he made it. I mean, he talked Joe Pesci out of retirement for this, even though he turned it down like 60 times. To even have him come back and then this is the first movie that Pacino was actually in with Scorsese and De Niro. And Pesci. I mean, they'll have those icons of our films, together for one last hoorah. I thought that was awesome.
This movie was almost like an urban legend. Like, we never know if this movie was actually being made for a long time. Like, it was talked about and it was referenced, but there was never any stills from production. There was never any pictures from on set. And I Heard You Paint Houses was a book that was released a while ago. And we thought, like, when I finally saw the trailer, I was like, holy shit, this movie actually exists, right? So for me, like, it built up to it. And yeah, it wasn't Goodfellas, it wasn't Casino, but it was a very, like, fitting cap for, like, because who knows if we'll see De Niro and Pesci in another Scorsese movie, or even playing a role like this. Like De Niro's doing movies like The Intern with Anne Hathaway. And like he's a softer actor now, right? So this was a cool cap on it, and I liked it. I also, a very underrated character. I forgot who he played, but Dominic Lombardo was in this movie, and he was
Sal Solano.
If you've ever watched Entourage, he was Dom in Entourage, and he was what's his name in The Wire? Beef
Herc.
Yeah. I've watched The Wire twice all the way through. I don't know it like I know The Sopranos, yes, but he's a fantastic actor, and I love watching him work. There's a really cool scene in Entourage where they have to go and kind of like seduce Bruno Kirby, who's like a Hollywood studio guy, to give Vincent Chase this role. And Bruno Kirby goes, I'm going to tell you guys a story, but it's about the Jewish mafia. And he gives him a little nudge right there. And then they steal the Shrek doll. So I don't know if you remember that, but that was I like that actor. I like Dominic Lombardozo.
Spit it out, Junior. No, I totally agree. He did a good role. But let's get into our next one, guys.
Funny how? I mean, what's funny about it? What? Just, you're funny. You mean, so? Let me understand this, because maybe it's me, I'm a little fucked up, maybe. But I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you. I make you laugh. I'm here to fucking amuse you. What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
1990s Goodfellas, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Paul Sorvino, and Lorraine Bracco. Budget of $25 million and made $47 million at the box office. Beef, tell me why this is one of your favorite mob movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's got everything here. It's got quotable lines. It's got Ray Liotta's kind of new on the scene and handsome and outstanding in the role. Lorraine Bracco's super hot as the female lead in this movie. It's got the very sad third stanza, which he kind of is required in mob movies. Joe Pesci's as violent as they come. I think the guy that he's playing in real life, that Tommy DeVito or whatever. Yeah, DeSimone. Was violent like that, exactly like this character. Yeah, absolutely love the movie. The only quibble I think I even have with the movie is there's a part that I didn't understand with the Lufthansa heist. Okay, so Jimmy Conway's character and their group, they have these low-level guys and they steal $6 million or whatever it is. And then his decision is to start killing off all these guys. And I never understood how, one, he's not a made man, and he got away with killing all these guys and hanging on to all this money himself. I'm sure kicking some upstairs, whatever. And two, that no other crews came after him. It always boggled my mind. It's always a thing that's left out there for me that, like, how the heck did that actually happen? But otherwise, absolutely terrific movie. Definitely in my top 5, always has been. And it's a movie, I probably the movie on the list I've rewatched the most. And I may go back and rewatch it, like, some night this week during dinner.
Yeah, I read your article from the 108, and I can see that aspect, but I think that they go kind of blur lines. I think a lot of the people that were in Jimmy's crew were not made as well. I think like Ray Liotta's character, Henry, he wasn't made. He wasn't a full-blooded Italian. I think Frankie Carbone was just an associate. I think those guys were not members of the mob, so he could do whatever he wanted. And plus, from what they were saying, he made a shitload of money for Paulie. So I'm guessing Paulie just looked the other way for him to do whatever he wanted to do. What do you think, Swell?
I mean, if there's a Mount Rushmore of mobster movies, like this is front and center, right? There's a couple other movies that are ahead of it, like in the slideshow, but I don't know if they're necessarily better than this movie. Like they're equivalent to this movie. And I know Fids will listen to this and talk shit because he's going to talk about The Godfather, and he's going to talk about Casino. But this movie is a movie that it doesn't matter where it's on or what part it's at. Like you stop and you're like, okay, cool. I can watch this for a little bit. Right. I think Beef talked about Ray Liotta as young. He's the new guy. We hadn't seen him in stuff before. Joe Pesci is so violent and the cast is so good. I mean, Samuel L. fucking Jackson is in this movie.
Yes,
right.
He's a big player.
There was a time in the late 90s, like 99, my buddy, my best friend in the whole world, made a joke that Samuel L. Jackson's in fucking everything. This dude is in every movie that comes out, right? So we're at the theater. It's Star Wars Episode 1 premiere in the summer of 99. My buddy Mike's like, man, it'd be funny if Samuel L. Jackson's in this movie. And I'm like, he is. And he's like, shut up. He didn't believe me. And I'm like, sure as shit. Mace Windu pops up on the screen. Like, the cast of this movie is perfect. It's so quotable. It's the scene walking through the Copa is like a masterclass of how to shoot a movie, or how to frame a shot. It's perfect, right? Like, it's so funny. Friend of the pod, Burly Cat, Nam. We went to the Sox game together last week or 2 weeks ago. And we had tickets, and the lines to get in, it was Crew Neck Sunday. I don't know if you remember Crew Neck Sunday, Beef, 2 weeks ago. And the lines to get into the ballpark was nuts. And Nam had these stadium club passes, and he's like, follow me over here, right? And we go into the stadium club, and my dad has never been in the stadium club. I've been with Nam before and other people before. And my dad is like, I felt like fucking Henry Hill, like walking into the Copa.
Yes.
Like you just skipped all these lines and we went through. And so people recognize the greatness of that scene. Sorry, I went on a tangent there, but that's what this movie does. I will talk about this movie all day for hours. It's perfect. I love it.
Yeah, it's great. What do you think about it, Sam?
Agree with Spo. Mount Rushmore, Mafia movies. It's an absolute classic. I think it was great that Casino came out after Goodfellas because Goodfellas is a much better movie all around. As biased as I am, it's just an all around better quality movie. But I think you really get a good grasp as far as who each character is. I thought Ray Liotta obviously is fantastic, perfect person to portray Henry Hill. But yeah, I mean, I think what's great about this movie is that you get specific characters that are not in it for very long, but are just absolute classic characters in this movie. You get Spider, who's absolutely classic. There's just like no name people who are
like Johnny Roast Beef or someone. Like there's guys you remember, like
Jimmy
the guy who's
two times. Jimmy two times.
Well, and then there's that line in there, Stax Edwards and Joe Pesci.
Stax is great. You get Stax, right? Stax is.
Pesci's like, I thought you had one of your bitches in here, and he's like, oh, she must have left.
Right.
Yes.
But not just this. I mean, you like this movie. Like I know Beef, you're a huge Sopranos fan. So Swole. Like,
Yep.
I'm a huge Sopranos fan. This movie has, like, The Sopranos has a bunch of actors from this movie. Vincent Pastore is in the beginning when they're taking in the fur coats. You got
Yes, he
Spider
is.
as Chris Maltasanti. You got
Paulie Walnuts
Beansy.
is in this movie too. Beansy's
in this movie.
Yes.
Paulie Walnuts is in this movie. It's just like an endless roll of Sopranos characters in this movie. Like that, you like, oh, now that you watch The Sopranos, oh yeah, they're in the fucking Sopranos. Like they're in this movie too. Like that's how cultural impact this movie had. Like it's to me, it's by far the better movie than Casino. I love Casino, and it's arguments that have gotten into people who actually believe this movie is better that is worse than Casino. I think Casino is great. I think Goodfellas is number one, and I think this is Scorsese's best movie he's directed. And to go off on a little like rant, in 1990, Scorsese lost out to Dances with Wolves by Kevin Costner. Dances with Wolves is a good movie. This movie kicks Dances with Wolves' ass, and he should have won an Oscar for this movie alone.
Preach.
But enough of us rambling about this. Let's get on to our next one.
Come on, man, that's your cousin. It ain't shit to me. He don't mean nothing to me. What's he gonna do, go back home? I don't give a damn what he does. Send his ass home. Hey, don't rub on that. You block that. You understand? That's alpaca. That's $25,000 alpaca. You block that shit. Right. You don't rubble. Put the club soda on there.
2007's American Gangster, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. This movie had a budget of $100 million and made $266 million at the box office. So, Beef, I know this was on your list as well. Let us know why.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love Denzel Washington's portrayal as well as Russell Crowe's, and I love their adversarial situation in the movie. You know, one thing I really like, I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast, is I like looking at the business side of what these guys are doing. And Denzel Washington's character, the Frank Lucas character, had to figure out a novel solution. He was in a bad spot. He had status, and then his boss passed away, and that status kind of evaporated. So he had money, and he had to take a shot at doing something. So he had to figure out an angle for himself, in which he did, which was using his connections in the U.S. military and going straight to the supplier to get his dope. And that was the way that landed him out there and got on in front of him. I also liked how he did his business. He was someone who was not flashy. There's the famous scene in the movie where he's sitting all the way up front and he's wearing the chinchilla, and that's how he gets noticed for like the first time. Because before that, he handled himself just like a no-name and kept a very low, quiet profile. It's a contrast because the guy who's the bad guy is that guy. Keeps a low profile, involves his family, supports everyone. And the guy who's the good guy is a lowlife. Russell Crowe's character is a horrible guy. Like he's honest on his job side, and then he's a terrible husband and father and friend, and he's just kind of a jerk. So I really love the contrast there. But really just the business, the inner workings of the business. There's another reason why I love watching The Wire, just all the innovations that they're able to do. And Frank Lucas's character absolutely does in this movie.
Totally agree with you. What about you, Sam? What do you think about this movie?
Chalk it up. Haven't seen it. I'm sorry.
Sam, you're popping a lot of mobster cherries, man, when you watch these movies.
There's a few that I have to see. This is definitely one of them. I have not seen American Gangster, but I have to watch it. Smoke, me and you. Chalk it up.
Yeah, but totally agree with what you're saying, Beef, about the movie. I think Denzel is excellent in his portrayal as Frank Lucas. Also Russell Crowe as Richie, and like just doing, like, I'm a nerd, so I like to read about stuff with movies. The factual thing about this is when he becomes his defensive attorney at the end of the movie, that actually really happened in real life, to the point where Frank Lucas actually made Richie one of his kids' godfathers.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
So,
that's amazing.
Yeah, they had a good relationship in terms of that, and just the fact that Frank Lucas had so much power and so much influence that they didn't even really give a shit about him selling the drugs. They wanted to go after the corrupt cops, which I thought was like hilarious.
Right.
Yeah, and then in the music aspect, this movie inspired Jay-Z to write his album American Gangster.
Yeah, Jay-Z did the whole soundtrack based on this movie. I rewatched this last night because I had seen it once before, and I never really considered it like an upper echelon. But holy shit, like I love the way that you talked about Frank at the Muhammad Ali fight. in the chinchilla coat and the chinchilla hat, and then the next scene, it's in his fireplace. He's burning it. I don't want to wear this shit anymore. Like,
yeah. He was doing it just for his wife, and then it blew his entire deal of staying low key.
There's a scene like later on in the movie where like he can't go out and he can't go anywhere, right? And his wife wants to go out for New Year's Eve, and Nicky Barnes, played by Cuba Gooding Jr. brilliantly, is in the outside of the club on New Year's Eve, like flashy, like doing everything. And he's like, "Do you want me to go around the back?" He's like, "I'm not sneaking in the back of my own fucking club." So they pick up Chinese food, and he lets his guard down, right? He goes to get the keys while his bodyguard's in there getting the Chinese food, and the car gets shot up and he gets shot, right? And then, like, you want to talk about cast, right? You have Russell Crowe, you have Denzel Washington. You also have like T.I. and Common play his cousins, right? And then RZA is one of the cops. Like, it's a great cast. It was a really great movie that I'm sad that I've only watched like twice now. Like, so thank you, Beef, for making me go back to watch this for this pod. It's the only movie on this list that I haven't seen multiple times.
Also, Josh Brolin's in the movie too. He plays the corrupt cop.
He's the crooked cop. Yes, he's a jerk off. Yes,
when he blows up the Shelby, and then Frank is like, "Hey, how's the Shelby?" He's like, "I fucking love that car." And Frank's just like, "Fuck you."
He's like, "Next time it'll be your house."
Next time it'll be your house. Yeah, so good, man.
Yeah, this movie is very good. It's very masterfully done. When you talk about being noticed and being too flashy, is that like if you go through mob history or mob lore with any organized crime, usually they tend to not be as flashy because it attracts so much attention.
Like Goodfellas, what did I tell you? Don't buy anything. One of them gets a $25,000 coat. One of them gets a fucking pink Cadillac. Don't buy anything.
Yeah, that part. And like it reminds me of another movie. It's not mob related. I guess it has some ties to it, but Confidence. And that's a scene where Dustin Hoffman tells Edward Burns about the time he got shot because he bought a white suit. And he said when they were doing the drive-by, who was the first person they saw? The person in white. Being too flashy and style can get you killed. And that's something that a lot of mafiosos and even organized crime live by. Don't be too flashy, you're gonna get caught. And if you like Whitey Bulger, the dude lived in his own condo, like a shitty condo, for 30 years and had millions of dollars in his wall. Like, you don't want to attract that much attention to you. And I think this movie portrays it a lot. Like, it's gonna get you in trouble. But let's move on to our next movie.
I don't know whether you notice or not, but you only have your fucking casino because I made that possible. I'm what counts out here, not your fucking country clubs or your fucking TV shows. And what the fuck are you doing on TV anyhow? You know, I get calls from back home every fucking day. They think you went batshit.
1995's Casino, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Sharon Stone, and James Woods. This movie had a budget of $50 million and made 116 at the box office. Now, Sam, here is your moment to shine.
It's your time to shine, baby.
Tell us why you love Casino.
I mean, it's a classic. Top to bottom. The only part I can critique of the movie is, so if you've read the book, which I think you all should have if you have not already, the book does a better job, I feel like, of diving a little bit more into, you know, my uncle's personal life, right? His family, my cousin Stephanie, all that kind of stuff. Obviously that was hard to put in the movie, but I think the book does a better job of, I think, talking about, you know, Lefty's life growing up and, you know, his personal relationships and all that kind of stuff. The movie, I think, does a better job of displaying how, you know, the mob ran Vegas and how, you know, he brought, you know, sports, you know, to sports betting to operate from within a casino, you know, at the Stardust Hotel, which was Tangiers. But I mean, it's a great movie, great book. And I think it's as close as you can do to what actually happened in a film, you know, based on, you know, what actually happened. And it's I mean, my uncle at the time was, I think the best way to put it is, the movie does a great job of exemplifying what his personality was, because he was a control freak. Everything had to be operated his way. Everything had to be done to, if it wasn't like the movie said, it's my way, it's the right way, the wrong way, the way I do it. And such an OCD guy, it runs in the family. We're all Jewish fucking OCD, complete fucking control freaks, but that's how he was. And I think the movie does a great job of, displaying all of that.
So Frank was your great uncle?
So yes, Lefty Rosenthal is my dad. My dad's name is Mark Mendelssohn, and I've showed Beef. Beef's talked to my dad before, actually numerous times.
I have, yeah. Talked to him on the phone. Yeah, good dude.
Mark Mendelssohn is my dad. My dad's mom was Ruth Rosenthal. Ruth Rosenthal's brother was Frank Lefty Rosenthal.
That's pretty cool. So how close were you to Frank?
Other than leaving me a savings bond when I was 4 years old, not that close.
Okay, so everything was just mostly spoken with your dad?
Yeah, but I met him. So my Uncle Frank passed away when I think I was 16. This was 2008. My dad was actually playing golf. I heard a story from my dad's friend when I was actually at a wedding about a year ago. My dad was playing golf at the time, and my dad's friend was with him. He gets a call from him, and my dad was very unexpected. My uncle was very good health, tall, skinny guy, really good shape, no history of anything really, no health issues, he was only 70. I want to say he was mid 70s at the time, not that old. And he gets a call, and my dad was very surprised because it was very unexpected. But yeah, I mean, I met him numerous times. I can't say that. I think I was too young to really know, what happened. But, nice guy. Just, I was just too young to really know kind of what was going on when it was going on.
Sam, if I could jump in here, just want to ask a question. What did your dad think of the portrayal of his uncle and his aunt, I guess, of Sharon Stone's character in the movie? How realistic did he think it was? Did he think there was any things that they left out or exaggerations or things they didn't get into?
Pretty spot on. My uncle was pretty critical of how Robert De Niro, portrayed him. But according to my dad, 9.5 to 10 out of 10. I mean, he was, the way he smoked a cigarette, everything, spot on. My dad met De Niro on the set, actually. I think he signed him like an autograph or something. But just from what I know from him and from what my dad has told me, it was spot on. The way he smoked a cigarette, the way he'd walk around the casino, the way he dressed, his flamboyant suits, all that kind of shit. I mean, just very, very spot on.
Has your dad heard any stories about Tony Spilotro, or in the movie he's portrayed by Joe Pesci playing Nicky Santoro? You have any stories you can share with us?
Yeah. So when I go home, I'm actually gonna be back. My parents live in Vegas now, and I'm gonna be back there in July. I'm gonna take some pictures. My Spilotro was actually at my dad's bar mitzvah, so seeing those pictures back. I mean, I saw those for the first time when I was probably 10. 11, 12 years old. And I didn't know the significance of that, but I mean, it's wild. Like, just knowing he was there. My dad, was still young at the time. He had no idea what was going on. But when I go home, when I see my parents in Vegas, I'll be back there in a couple of months. I'll bring some pictures back to share with you guys.
Like, I legit, like, no bullshit. Like, I just got goosebumps. Like, as you told that story, like at your dad's bar mitzvah, like, that is crazy.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I obviously never Spilotro. I'm too young to, I never obviously met him. My dad obviously met him years ago. But he was a straight guy. I mean, from what I was told, just based on how he, kind of walked around, he loved, being in restaurants, greeting people, making sure everyone was happy. It wasn't like the character you're seeing in the movie where he's very violent and stuff. He was pretty, pretty personable. I mean, you would have no idea if you're just, kind of, a nobody just kind of hanging out with him. You'd have no idea the guy, had a history of violence. You just wouldn't know.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like the Hollywood portrayal of, I mean, there are people who are out of character. Like Tommy DeSimone is what they say he was in real life. But I mean, they kind of, beef it up a little bit, Beefloaf, for the Hollywood portrayal of the characters. But I've heard people say the same thing. Somebody that used to come to my dad's auto shop knew of the Spilotro family. He said the same thing. Like, he's not completely a monster as he was in the movies. He's actually kind of calmer until you pissed him off, and then it went from there.
It's the same thing with like people we know. Like, no one would know that My Sock Summer has a complete history of violent psychopathic history, right? Like, no one would know that by the way he interacts with everybody.
That's right.
Shout out MSS.
What's cool is I think what's awesome about the movie, going along with like, how it's very, related to, how Vegas became what it is now. I mean, I think it's very underrated. Like, you're seeing the movie and you have no idea if you're in Vegas that like right now what happened 30, 40 years ago. I think that's the coolest part. It's like you're almost like in the movie, if you're watching it, you're seeing history. I mean, we all know Vegas, but what happened in old Vegas 40 years ago, it's wild. I mean, the shit that was pulled back then would never happen now. And it's pretty cool to kind of see that.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to one of the questions that K-Fids wanted me to ask you. So K-Fids, you are getting a question asked in the pod. He wanted to know why Sheriff Lamb harassed your uncle in the mob, but kind of like didn't harass Benny Binion as much. Like, what are your opinions on that?
Say that again. I'm sorry. You say it again.
He wanted to know why Sheriff Lamb harassed your uncle and the mob, but kind of left Benny Binion alone. Like, do you have any opinion on that?
If I'm not mistaken, which part of the movie is that? If you can,
no, it's not part of the movie. It's more in general that Sheriff Lamb just going after the mob and your uncle, basically being a hard ass on them, and like basically letting Benny Binion do whatever the hell he wanted, like the Wild Wild West out there.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it has a lot to do with. I mean, there was no rules back then. There were no like, the mob had control of everything. And if you were a part of the mob, if you had any mob ties, you were, my uncle was a Jewish guy. He was not in any way, shape, or form a made guy. But, when you have Tony Spilotro, who's, connected, to, in the movie, Remo Gaggi, whatever fuck his name is, who's based on, and you got Frank Cullotta, who's based on, Frank Vincent's supposed to be Frank Cullotta in the movie. It has a lot to do with just being connected to those guys. I mean, my uncle was not a violent guy by any means. Never screamed, never yelled. I've been told that I'm actually a smaller version, a younger version of him, because I don't get mad really ever. I'm a pretty, lovable guy, but I think he had such a presence in Vegas where he knew the right people and he knew where to go if something were to happen. I don't know if that answers or does not answer your question, but that's kind of how it was. I mean, he was the brains behind their operation, and Spilotro was the muscle. That's how it was.
There's like a pretty famous line in the movie where they talk about how Sam knew like if the quarterback was on coke or not, or what kind of hardwood they use for the bounce of the basketball. How into, and this, like, because we've all met because of White Sox Twitter, right? Except for Yumper, who's a Cubs fan. How into sports was your uncle?
Obsessive compulsive.
Did he have like
I think beef. Sorry, Spo, go on.
Did he have like teams that he leaned towards, or like he just didn't care? He just liked sports.
He didn't care. It had nothing to do with which team he liked, which team he didn't like. It was I could go and I have stories that I got to hold back a little bit, but I think that what was cool was that Beef interviewed my dad, and this was one of the cooler stories that I actually had not heard until the interview. My uncle called my dad. This was probably, my dad was about my age. I want to say he was like 29, 30. And this was probably early 80s, 80, 82, 81, 82, somewhere on there. And this was during the whole, everything was going on. And this was before any of this shit was going on. Twitter, you couldn't find a score of a game unless you were listening to the radio. Really, I mean, TV, radio, but like, you know, he called my dad, who was in Chicago, and was asking for the score of a football game. I think he had hundreds of thousands. I mean, I don't know how much he had in the game, but it was a lot. And I believe it was a Northwestern football game. And he left the phone because my dad was with my grandma at the time. Didn't want my grandma to know what was going on. So he leaves the phone off the hook, just on the radio, without my grandma in the room, just so my uncle could hear the game. And that was one of the cooler stories I've heard because I hadn't heard of it until the interview. So that was pretty cool. But he was, to answer your question, obsessive compulsive. He didn't care, you know, what team was playing, but he knew everything. He really did. I mean, the quarterback on coke thing, I don't know if that's, you know, for sure or not.
Right. Right.
I
think it was just cool. I think it was just cool because like I think that's a common thing, like that we all love sports, right? Like Beef likes to bet on the Jets. I don't know why, but that's his thing, right? Like
it's a good bit. Don't worry about
it. We all love sports, and I think like it's cool that we can still work that into the conversation because sports is like my favorite thing besides
it's before all this was. I mean, now you're knowing if a quarterback's not playing, if a quarterback's, you know, day to day, whatever, but it's before any of this. So, you know, back then, knowing this ahead of time, it's you have an edge. Now it's just it's common knowledge.
Can you imagine what kind of like heaven he would be in right now with the way that you can access sports scores and games in real time? Like, I can't imagine what it would be like.
When I walked into his house, and so he moved to Boca Raton, Florida, which is where my grandma, his sister, lived, and this was like, I want to say about 15 years ago. I walked into his house, and I had met him only one time prior to this, my uncle. And I walk in, it's me and my brothers and my dad. And we walk to the right, and he's got a room, and every computer screen has poker, blackjack, craps, and every possible casino game you could think of on the computer screen. And it was cool. I swear I could not fucking make this up. It was really cool. I had casino chips from the Stardust. I still have them somewhere. I got them somewhere. My brother might have them now, but yeah.
No, that's really, really cool, Sam. And like, one of the reasons me and Swell were kind of like holding off on doing a deep dive in casino, besides when we did it with Richard Roper, which, you know, we had to do it with Roper, a little bit of it. It's because we really wanted to have you on to tell these stories.
Yumper, you got his name right. Congratulations, buddy.
Yes.
It's out of line.
Yes, I did. Fuck you, Swell.
Dude, you made fun of my stutter earlier in this episode. I had to do that.
See, didn't off my thought. But seriously though, Sam, though, like stuff like this is something that we really wanted to have you on because who would know better than you? I mean, he's part of your family. So we really appreciate you sharing these stories with us. Like, it means a lot.
We'll have to all get together and watch it again.
That would be awesome. But in terms of the movie, like, what did you guys think about Frank Collada, who was an advisor on the movie, actually reenacting his hit? Like, what did you guys think about that?
Well, so R.I.P. Frank Collada. I believe he just passed away a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yep.
Frank Vincent, I believe, is in every Mafia movie that's been ever known to man, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I actually heard
every single one of them.
Sam, I heard a story about that. I think I heard him interviewed on the Mike North morning show a million years ago, and they asked him about that. You're in every Mafia movie ever. And he said something like, you know what? It's just there's a small community of Italian actors. And so that's kind of what it is. There's not a big pool, or at least there wasn't a big pool of Italian actors, so they didn't have a lot to draw from. So you end up with some of the same people in these movies.
So you're telling me he didn't have to compromise?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I had to throw in a Sopranos reference there as well.
I missed the Sopranos reference. What'd you say?
I said so he didn't have to compromise. No. Spent 20 years in the joint.
One of the most absolutely gratifying scenes in a TV or movie ever is when his head gets run over by his own SUV. In the
Phil Leotardo.
Yeah,
Phil Leotardo's head.
But I think it's the same way with like British actors, right? Like you see the same British actors in every movie. No one ever says shit about that, but like the Italians in all the Mafia movies, and they give everybody a hard time.
Yeah.
What was your guys' favorite scene in the movie? If you were to put a favorite scene in Casino.
Me personally, my favorite scene is when he's talking to the banker, and he tells him how he would crack his fucking head open, and then when he gets out of jail, which is probably the same time he's gonna be getting out of his coma, he'll walk in there and crack his fucking head open again because he's stupid. He doesn't care about jail. That part to me was hilarious. Just like his delivery and the way the banker was like scared shitless. And Robert De Niro's in the corner like, what the fuck are you doing? That part is like my favorite part of the movie. What about you, Swell?
I think the scene where he tells Roger Corman, he's like, one, either you were in on it or you're too stupid to figure it out. But either way, I can't have you working at a casino. And then that brought on the whole, like, he fired him, and then it brought in the sheriff, and it created this whole thing. I think that's probably my favorite scene. Besides, like we talked about this on the Roper episode, besides when the Moody Blues song plays while Sharon Stone's giving Joe Pesci head in the construction trailer.
Incredible.
Beefloaf, what about you?
You know what? It's almost a too difficult question to ask. Like, I love the scene when they're.
Is this your number? Is this your number one? This is your Mount Rushmore of Mount Rushmore.
This is my number 2, and it would be ahead of Goodfellas for me. I just think the story is better. Like that for me, I get the I love the Saturday nights are for the wives, but Friday nights are for the girlfriends. There's so much quotable stuff in Goodfellas, but this story is more like I just feel this story more. I mean, I love all the scene. I love the scene when they beat the shit out of James Woods' character. I mean, he's such a scumbag in this movie, and it's so like you need some good villains in a movie. And so you've got the county commissioner who's up his ass, because he had to fire Joe Bob Briggs. I can't believe you didn't call him Joe Bob Briggs, Justin, because I used to love those movies. I used to love those movies, that TMC
Lenny
thing
Marmer,
back in the day.
Lester Diamond.
Yeah, Lester Diamond, exactly. The James Woods character, Lester Diamond, is such a scumbag throughout the entire movie, and I kind of love every scene with him because it's so uncanny that the Ginger character kind of has everything together except for that. She's got this one really bad vice, and it keeps showing up and showing up. So, I mean, to pick a scene, I love the scene that Yumper brought up too, where he's talking to Charlie Clark, the banker. That's just like an unbelievable. You're not expecting kind of like that's where he's going to go with it. It's tremendous. And Ginger's like drunk as hell right before that. Like he's like Robert De Niro's character is like pushing around in the room like to let these guys talk, and it's tremendous.
Yeah, it's just hilarious, that part. Sharon Stone too. Like, this is probably her best role.
Yeah,
that I can think of. Like, she was excellent in it, and she played a drugged out woman. I think, did she get nominated for an Oscar for this? I can't remember, but I think she did. She was excellent in this movie. Very underrated. Because
I think what's great about the movie in general is that Sharon Stone looked like Ginger. Joe Pesci looked like Spilatro. De Niro looks nothing like my uncle in this movie. Zero. Absolutely zero. He does a great job of everything, but he does not look a lick like Lefty Rosenthal. But regardless, that does not matter. It is an iconic movie. I think my favorite part of the movie, and it's probably questionable, is the car bombing scene, because that happened. It was outside of Tony Roma's restaurant in Vegas at the time. And that now is an adult Hollywood video store. But it was Tony Roma's restaurant, which my parents actually used to go to with my uncle, with Don Rickles' character. His name was Murray Ehrenberg. He's Don Rickles in the movie. My parents used to go out with them all the time. That happened after they were at Tony Roma's. He gets into his car, and what saved him, I'm sure you may or may not know, was it was a specific model car, had a metal plate underneath the driver's seat of the car, and the door was open when he turned the ignition on. So that, combined with the metal plate, ended up saving his life. Otherwise, if the door was closed, probably would have been trapped in the car. But to this day, I believe they still have not figured out who did it or why.
Couple things. One, they recreated that exact scene almost shot for shot in a Nas video called Street Dreams. I don't know if you remember it, but they basically retell Casino, but Nas is playing your uncle's character. And two, we actually had to pull Bruhan Luke out of that adult video store at like 3 a.m. while we took our Vegas trip. Like, we couldn't get him to leave.
Big if true.
It's on, I believe it's on Sahara, if I'm not mistaken.
Poor Luke. No, that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, again, thank you so much for sharing your stories. But let's get to our final movie.
You look terrible. I want you to eat. I want you to rest well, and a month from now, this Hollywood big shot's gonna give you what you want.
Too late. They start shooting in a week.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
The Godfather, 1972, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, with a screenplay by Mario Puzo, starring Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, Robert Duvall, Richard Castellano, and Diane Keaton. This movie had a budget of $7.2 million and made a whopping $291 million at the box office in 1972. This movie is considered the perfect movie. It's won 4 Oscars. Beef, I know this is your Mount Rushmore number 1. Tell me why.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just everything top to bottom, the way it's shot, the look of it, the business, the organized, keeping the family, and the Marlon Brando is just obviously outstanding, amazing in this, and I have to stay with this one. The second one, I watch, I like, it's fine. I don't like the flashbacks. I don't like any of that. This really, the Vito character is really endearing to me, even though he's a cold-hearted killer. And I absolutely love when he slaps the shit out of Johnny Fontaine. And he said, "You can act like a man," and smacks him like right after. It was right after he puts the cat down. He's like petting the cat. He puts the cat down. He talks to him, and then he gives him a crack, like to kind of get your act together.
And then he mocks him.
And Tom Hagen's laughing, just sitting there right with him. It's just everything. Terrific characters, top to bottom. Just a movie I can watch over and over and over again.
What about you, Swell?
So, when I was in 8th grade, I got the end of the school year. I got into some trouble because I threw some water balloons out of the school bus window, and the water balloons hit a car, and the car ran into a fire hydrant and totally screwed up the car. Right, so I got into some trouble, and I got suspended from school, and my dad was pissed, and he grounded me. And when he grounded me, he took the TV out of the room. He took the stereo out of the room. He's like, "You can read, you can hang out, and that's it. Shut the fuck up. That's all you could do." Well, on the bookshelf, my dad had like an OG hardcover copy of Mario Puzo's The Godfather. And I read that book front to back like 3 or 4 times. And I was infatuated with it. And I was talking to my dad about it. And my dad was like excited. He's like, "Holy shit, like you read this book, like you like it, like let's take you to see the movie," right? So my first like foray back into the real world after being grounded all summer was, I don't know if you guys remember One Schaumburg Place. It's now Streets of Woodfield, right? But it was like a glass strip mall. But my dad took me to a midnight showing of The Godfather at One Schaumburg Place. And like you could hear the crickets in Italy when he's meeting Apollonia, like in the corner of the screen and the surround sound. And I've been obsessed with this movie ever since. It's the perfect movie. I think Beef talked about like the way that he talks to Johnny Fontaine and Robert Duvall is cracking up, and I don't know if that was ad-libbed or not, but like he's like this, he's like trying to hide the laughter. And then Michael like doesn't want to get involved in this at all, and all of a sudden he is. And Diane Keaton as Kay, it's a perfect movie. It's beautiful. The lighting in Vito's office when he's talking to the funeral director at the beginning of the movie, and then the same scene in The Sopranos when they're going down in the elevator to plan Olivia's funeral. Right? It's been mocked. It's not mocked or recreated. It's a perfect movie. I love every single thing about it. And it was also like, if I'm being honest with you, it was like seeing Apollonia's tits for the first time was like a big deal in my life, right? Like,
there's no question. There's no doubt about that.
What about you, Sam? What'd you think of The Godfather?
It's a great movie. Full disclosure, I think I've only seen The Godfather one time. Have not seen the second one. What's the thing in The Godfather with what's the big thing with mattresses? Because I know that's what's the, I don't know what it is or what it dives into, but the one thing I remember about the movie is the whole thing with mattresses. Can anyone dive more into that for me? Because I can't remember.
Yeah, the Corleone and the Tattaglia family, are going to go to war, or they think a war is imminent, and they're talking about going to the mattresses, where a bunch of the guys have to go hole up in one apartment. It's like 15, 20 people in one apartment, and they're all just sleeping on mattresses in shitty little one room apartments. They don't actually show that, but it's referenced.
Okay. Because I remember that was a big part of the movie. I do remember. I don't know if that's any significance to the movie or if that's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, they show a little bit of it when they do when Michael goes overseas to Italy. They show Clemenza sitting down, and then there's a time lapse. It's kind of like become like a big term. I don't know if it's been used before. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like even in The Sopranos, they make jokes about it. I can go hit the mattress. I have a Tempur-Pedic in my house and stuff like that. Like, so it's like you're basically laying low.
In Sopranos, they do it at the end, actually. Well, right before they have the big sit down with New York when they want to. Exactly, before they're going to get the okay to whack out Phil Leotardo. That's what they're doing. They're hiding out him and Paulie and them guys.
Yeah. But in terms of this movie, it is a movie that I can rewatch as many times. Like, it's kind of like Shawshank for me. If I see this movie on, and me and my brother-in-law joke about this all the time because this is his all-time favorite movie too. If it's on, we, for some reason, no matter where it's at, we just watch it to the end because it's one of those movies that you got to watch. Marlon Brando is great in the movie. I mean, he won an Oscar for the movie. This movie launched Al Pacino's career. But I do have to go back to the part that it's kind of bad about the movie, and that's the James Caan fight. It's probably the worst fucking fight I've ever seen in my life. And Fids will always talk about this as well. That punch he gives Carlo, it's like it's like 4 feet away. And then I read today when I was just doing a little research on the movie, they shot that scene for 4 days. Like, how the fuck did you get that part right? Like,
that was the best take.
Francis Ford Coppola isn't the genius you think he is. If that was the take that he decided to go with.
So I want to see the other takes. Like, was it even worse? Like, that's what I want to see. But no, in all seriousness, this movie is like a masterpiece. It's the gold standard of mob movies. Like, and The Godfather 2 beef. I like The Godfather 2. I think it's a very good movie. Doesn't hold the candle to the first original. And there's very few movies that are actually better than the original. I mean, Terminator 2 is probably the only one I can think of right now, top of my head. But yeah, I mean, and then you have the third one, and a lot of people don't like to talk about the third one, but the whole trilogy is very good. I think Brando's character in here, Pacino's character performance is excellent, and you see the arc of Michael Corleone as he starts off as a war hero, or he's really, really proud guy, and then he becomes like his soul is basically being torn apart and becoming corrupted, and then you get what you get at the end of Godfather 3. So I think the books are excellent. I'm actually rereading them now. Like, the movie is, to me, is all-time classic.
Yeah, Michael Corleone is like a monster, and that's why I like the comparison between the two different Dons really endears me to Vito, But what's interesting about when you splice 2 in there, and depending on which version of 2 you get to see like, determine whether he was really opportunistic in taking over his neighborhood or whether he was a do-gooder. When he sees the what was Don Fanucci get jumped and the guy's got no backup, and he knows that the guy has no hand. He can take advantage of this guy, and he realizes like it's an opportunistic thing. So when you just watch the first movie, you think, oh, this is just like he's a man of the people, he's an endearing guy. But then you realize that Vito really did have a mean streak in him. And he was opportunistic in taking over this situation when you watch 2. Maybe that's part of the reason why I like 2 less, because that opened my eyes to that. I wanted to look at him as like, I know he's a killer and everything, but he's this, this father figure in this movie.
Beef, did you ever watch the Supercut, the HBO Supercut?
Where they run it all together?
They merge them, yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that, yes.
What did you think of that?
I liked it. I liked seeing it like that after seeing the other way, obviously. Like, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much kind of as a straight through 7-hour one movie like that. But I did like it watching it afterwards just to see that kind of all together. And I like that there's an extra scene in there with Clemenza when they're going to kill what's his name, and he stops at the restaurant and he goes in there and eats and makes the guys wait in the car while he's in there. Like, good funny extra stuff in there.
Yeah, and Clemenza's character, probably one of the famous lines, leave the gun, take the cannoli. Like, that's iconic. There's just so many good things about the movie. It's very quotable. It still holds up to today. You got Brando, who people are considered probably one of the greatest actors of all time. Like, it's just, I cannot say so many good things about this movie. I just find it crazy that Coppola wasn't the first choice for this movie. Actually, Sergio Leone was. And if you guys know Sergio Leone, he basically had one thing to do with this. He did want to do his own thing. And he did Once Upon a Time in America in the 80s, which was a good movie, but it's not Godfather-esque. So he kind of missed out.
I think my favorite scene is the baptism, like at the end of the movie, right? Like do you renounce like the devil and all of his works? And like, growing up Catholic, like that was like a crazy scene to me. And like Michael looks and he's like, I do renounce them. And like he's got this look in his eyes. He's just like, fucking evil dies tonight, right? Like,
I was waiting all fucking episode for you to put that in here, and I was thinking maybe he's not going to do it, and you fucking did it now. Yeah, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming at some time. Jesus Christ, you threw me off my train of thought. So, what's your favorite part of the movie for real?
I think the best part of the movie and my favorite part of the movie is the wedding scene, right? Like you have the dance, and you have like the introduction of Luca Brasi, and then there's a meme or a GIF that Beef uses all the time where Lucy's talking about Santino, and she's just like,
yes.
And if you like Yumper, you're rereading the books, right? The description of Sonny's number in the book is even more
it's very graphic. Yes,
it's very graphic. But I think the wedding scene is my favorite, right? Like, Michael tells the story about Johnny Fontaine and about how like Tom Hagen's going to be his consigliere, and you get to meet everybody, and like Sonny throws the FBI cameras down and then just throws money at them like they're fucking peasants. The wedding scene is my favorite. What about you, Yum?
There's 2 scenes. There's actually when Luca Brasi's actually outside practicing his lines. That makes me laugh because it just shows how nervous this tough guy is. So nervous to even meet the Don. And then when you read the books, you kind of understand why Luca Brasi and Vito were so close. But that part cracks me up. And also, it's kind of a small part, but it's something that me and my brother-in-law talk about and other people have talked about, is when Michael's on the phone with Diane Keaton and Clemenza goes, Michael, why don't you tell that girl you love her? It just makes me laugh. I don't know why. It just cracks me up.
I love you with all of my heart. Soon I'm gonna die.
What about you, Beef? What's your favorite part?
It's a small part, but I love the part at the hospital when Michael gets there and there's no one else there. And Enzo, the baker, he comes and he's like, oh, I'll help you. I'll help you. And it makes you realize how every little favor that this man did helped protect his entire organization. So even this by chance thing, this guy shows up just to pay his respects because he kept him in the country so he can marry the baker's daughter. And, and then this guy's standing out there and he's like, oh, just put your hand in your coat like you have a gun. And this guy doesn't have shit. He's just standing there and he's like, and they're pretending they're security or whatever. And all those guys go by and he's like, he can't even hold the cigarette to light it. Michael has to light the cigarette for the poor guy. He's shaking so much. But I liked it because it was like, yeah, this is what you build. When you're that guy and you do favors for everyone, these are the types of things, the residual value of, hey, you know what, you've looked out for these people, well, now they're looking out for you, and I really kind of like that.
What about you, Sam? What was your favorite part of the movie?
I think it's been too long since I've seen the movie to have a favorite part, but I don't know. Honestly, I got to rewatch the movie. Svo, I think we got a few that we need to watch together. Beefloaf.
We have
would
some
love
work
for you to
do,
join
like,
as well.
We have some work to do. See, while you were out, like, talking to girls and being popular, I was watching movies. So, like, you still might have the leg up on me.
We got some work to do, Svo.
Yes, you do got some work to do, Sam. But guys, I know I said we only want to take a short time, but we ended up rambling on. But thank you guys so much. Beef, thank you so much for coming on. Sam, thank you so much, guys. Like, I really enjoyed doing this with you guys.
Beef, before you go, what do you guys got going on, man? Like, what's
108? What do we have going on? I mean, 108, we got everything going on. So if you want to come find me and my cohorts, Dreezy, My Sex Summer, you can go to fromthe108.com. You can find us at from the 108 on Twitter as well. We do the Sunday Soak, which is a hot tub video that we do it on YouTube and on Twitter every home weekend. It's Sunday morning. Sam, you're right. It is the #1 rated hot tub sports Chicago video that there is out there.
I believe it's 3 years in a row, the #1 hot tub podcast in Chicago.
It absolutely is. We have a blog that's at fromthe108.com. We do a podcast that's generally weekly, and that's on Thursday nights. We do a live stream from the 108 podcast. It's White Sox centric, but it's baseball, beer, and bullshit. And a couple other things we got going. We're starting to do some what they call way too early pregame shows, where we get up early on Saturday mornings, and Treasy and I will talk for 20 minutes about the upcoming game. We're also going to be working with the Sox Machine blog, doing something on playback, which is us talking over a live baseball game. So it'll be like a Mystery Science Theater 3000, except with us knuckleheads doing it. So we have a lot of stuff going on at fromthe108.com. You can find all your merch, everything there. So appreciate you guys having me on. Love you guys, and I can't wait to see y'all at the ballpark too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will say that your way too early, like this week, was not only did we get a plug, but it was hilarious, and I love your defense of the Apple TV broadcast. I appreciate you. I'm a homer on 2 accounts. The Apple stuff and the White Sox stuff. So I appreciate you.
Awesome.
And just thanks for spending a couple hours with us, guys.
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was a blast. Honestly, I'm happy we did this. I would love to be on again at some point. This was very fun, and honestly made the weekend just a lot, much better. So
nice,
this was very fun.
Nice little cap.
Yeah, man, for sure. And Beef, I've told you this in person, but again, you and Treasy, thank you so much for just even coming out, talking to us about our pod, helping us along. That means a lot to us. And if you guys haven't heard from the 108, I'm a Cubs fan. I support the hell out of them. They're hilarious. Their banter, great chemistry with the guys. I even got my wife listening to them now, which is kind of fun.
Yes.
Awesome. So also check them out at the ballpark in the 108 section. Great people to hang out with, good people to chill with. But thanks guys so much again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, guys, take it easy. All right, so with that, let's talk about what's coming on next. So for next week, since summer is around the corner, we decided, why don't we talk about these summer blockbusters, the top grossing summer blockbusters, the top 10 of them. And let's dive into those and discuss those. What do you think about that?
Man, there's something different about a movie in the summer. Like, you're out all day with your friends, it's hot, and at night you want to go to the movies. You want to see a good, loud, obnoxious movie. So you go see Transformers, you go see Independence Day or something like that, man. I'm jacked for this episode. Like, almost as jacked as I was for this episode. Super, super cool stuff that we'll have. That'll be in 2 weeks, right?
Yes, sir. In 2 weeks, we're going to go into that. And before we get to Swole's final thought, I just want to say my thank yous for tonight. Thank you again to Beef, the 108 guys. Thank you so much for Sam for coming on and giving us those awesome stories. And also
really
thank
cool
you guys.
stories from Sam.
Yeah, it's really cool stories. And thank you guys for listening. It started off as a fun project. I mean, we're having tons of fun with it. We fucking interviewed Richard Roper. Something
That was actually my nickname in high school. Was tons of fun.
Tons of fun. Well, just the fact that we interviewed Roper and then we had the legend of Beefloaf on this week, only upward, guys. That's the only thing. Everything's looking up Millhouse.
Everything's coming up Millhouse. I love it. I love it.
But with that, guys, let's get to Swole's final word.
Oh, that's a good picture of me. I think I was working out in that picture, right?
Definitely.
Hashtag porn. There's no significant final thought this week, guys. Like, I don't have a lot to add. I just want to say, like, if you're a mom and you listen to this podcast, happy Mother's Day. We are recording on Sunday night of Mother's Day. I'm very excited for the movies that are coming out this summer. And if you're listening to this and you hit my DMs or the Yumper and Svo DMs, we will put you and one guest into our screening of Top Gun Maverick, a private screening with just Yumper and Svo listeners on June 4th, 7:30 at Streets of Woodfield. Yes, it's at Streets of Woodfield, not at Oakbrook. That was my screw up. But hit my DMs and tell me what your favorite Tom Cruise movie is, and I'll get you on the list to come see the movie with us. Other than that, we appreciate you guys. We love all of our listeners, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you for listening to Yumper and Svo at the Show podcast, a Tan and Glove production.
That's it. I'm getting out of here.